Welcome to our magical sleep journey. The black screen will help to get rid of unnecessary light so you can sleep better. Try to listen as carefully as you can because there can be hidden secrets in this story. So now relax, close your eyes, and listen to this magical story from another dimension. Once upon a time, in a land where the moon never fully set and the stars hummed lullabies, there was a hidden valley cradled between the folds of twilight. This was the Valley of Dreamweavers, a place where the air shimmered with the soft glow of fireflies and the rivers flowed with liquid starlight. The trees here grew not leaves, but tiny silver bells that chimed in the gentlest breeze, their sound so delicate it could only be heard by those on the verge of sleep. In this valley lived a young dreamweaver named Alara. Her hair was woven from strands of midnight, and her eyes held the quiet gleam of faraway constellations. Each night, she wandered the valley with a basket made of woven moonbeams, collecting fragments of dreams that floated like dandelion seeds on the wind. Some dreams were bright and bubbly, others soft and wistful, and a few were tinged with the shadowy hues of forgotten memories. Alara gathered them all, spinning them into delicate threads that she wove into blankets of slumber for those who struggled to find rest. One evening, as the last light of day dissolved into violet shadows, Alara noticed something unusual, a dream unlike any she had seen before. It glowed with a deep, indigo light, pulsing like a heartbeat. When she reached out to touch it, the dream whispered a single word: follow. Curious, Alara let the dream guide her through the valley, past the whispering reeds of the starry brook, beyond the hills where the dream sheep grazed on clouds, and into a forgotten glade where the air smelled of lavender and old parchment. There, beneath the ancient dreaming oak, sat a creature she had only heard of in stories, the Sandman's eldest daughter, Nyxia. Her wings were made of woven twilight, and her fingers trailed stardust as she motioned for Alara to sit beside her. "You've been chosen," Nyxia murmured, her voice like wind through silk. A child in the waking world has lost their way to sleep, and only a dreamweaver can guide them back. Alara's heart fluttered. She had never left the valley before, but Nyxia pressed a single silver key into her palm, a key that could unlock the door between dreams and reality. With a deep breath, Alara turned the key in the air, and suddenly, she was standing in a quiet bedroom where a small boy lay awake, his eyes wide with restless worry. Kneeling beside him, Alara unfolded her moonbeam basket and drew out the indigo dream. As she placed it gently upon his pillow, the dream unfurled like a flower, wrapping the room in a soft, cerulean glow. The boy's eyelids grew heavy as the dream whispered to him a story of a ship sailing on a sea of clouds, of a friendly dragon who collected lost socks, of a library where every book was written in the language of fireflies. Slowly, the boy's breathing deepened, his fingers uncurling against the sheets as the dream carried him away. Alara smiled, brushing a strand of starlight from his forehead before stepping back through the door to her valley. By the time she returned, the first light of dawn was brushing the horizon, turning the silver bells of the trees to gold. Nyxia was gone, but in her place lay a small vial of eternal twilight, a gift for the dreamweaver who had ventured beyond her home to bring rest to a restless soul. And so, Alara continued her work, weaving dreams not just for the valley, but for all those in the world beyond who needed a little magic to find their way to sleep. And if you listen very, very closely on the quietest nights, you might just hear the chime of her silver bells, calling you gently into dreams of your own. As the seasons turned in the Valley of Dreamweavers, Alara's legend grew, not just among the dream folk, but in the whispered wishes of children who felt her presence in their slumber. The vial of eternal twilight glowed softly on her windowsill, casting delicate shadows that danced like silent storytellers on her walls. Yet, as time passed, she noticed something strange. The dreams she collected began to change. Some were tinged with a hue she had never seen before, a color that existed between gold and violet, pulsing with an almost musical energy. When she touched them, they hummed with a vibration that made her fingertips tingle. Nixia had once told her that the rarest dreams were born from the hearts of those who had forgotten how to dream at all. These, she realized, were awakening dreams that carried not just rest, but a secret kind of magic. One night, as Alara wove a blanket from these shimmering threads, the fabric itself began to ripple like water. A face appeared in its folds, a girl with storm-gray eyes and a crown of wildflowers, staring back at her from somewhere beyond the valley. The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, the dream unfolded around Alara, pulling her into its vision. She saw a city where the streets were paved with forgotten memories, where lampposts flickered with captured laughter. The girl was there, running through the alleys, her hands outstretched as if chasing something invisible. Above her, the sky was not a sky at all, but a vast, shifting tapestry of half-remembered stories. Alara understood at once. This was the realm of the almost lost, a place where dreams went when they were on the verge of fading forever. The vision dissolved, leaving Alara breathless. She knew what she had to do. With the woven blanket draped over her shoulders like a cloak, she turned the silver key once more, but this time, she spoke a name into the lock. Leora. The door opened not to a child's bedroom, but to the edge of a crumbling bridge in that strange, twilight city. The air smelled of burnt sugar and old pages, and the wind carried voices that seemed to call from every direction at once. The girl Leora stood at the center of the bridge, her back to Alara. Around her, fragments of dreams disintegrated like ash. "You're not supposed to be here," Leora said without turning. "No one comes here twice." Alara stepped forward. Twice. Leora finally faced her, and Alara gasped. Her eyes were not just gray, they were made of storms, swirling with thunder and quiet rain. "You don't remember," Leora whispered. "But you were here before. This is where Dreamweavers are born." A memory flickered in Alara's mind, a half-formed image of herself standing in this very spot, reaching for a falling star that split into 1,000 threads. The threads had woven themselves into her bones, into her breath. She had always been a Dreamweaver, but how had she forgotten? Leora took her hand. "The realm is fading because the waking world has stopped believing. But you've been weaving dreams back into them. That's why the colors are changing." A great shudder ran through the city then, as if it were exhaling. Somewhere in the distance, a clock tower struck an hour that didn't exist. "We have to wake them up," Leora said urgently. "Not from sleep, from forgetting." And so, Alara did something no Dreamweaver had ever done. She took the blanket from her shoulders and threw it into the wind. The threads unraveled, becoming birds, becoming fireflies, becoming whispers that rushed through the streets and up into the sky. Where they touched, the city began to remember. The lampposts burned brighter, the cobblestones regained their gleam. Back in the Valley of Dreamweavers, the silver bells rang out in a chorus so loud it echoed in the hearts of dreamers everywhere. And for the first time in centuries, the moon dipped below the horizon, just for a moment, as if bowing to the dawn. When Alara returned, Nixia was waiting, her stardust trailing in anxious swirls. "You've changed the rules," she said, but her voice was warm with wonder. Alara smiled, touching the vial of eternal twilight. "No," she said. "I just reminded them how the story goes." And somewhere, in a room where a child was just beginning to stir from sleep, a single indigo dream lingered on the windowsill, waiting to be dreamed again. The indigo dream on the windowsill trembled, then unfolded like a letter no one had opened in 100 years. Inside was a map, not of places, but of silences. The spaces between heartbeats, the pauses between breaths, the hush just before a name is remembered. Alara knew this map. It led to the well of unfinished stories. No Dreamweaver had ever gone there. Some tales are not meant to be completed, some voices are meant to stay echoes. But the map glowed insistently, and the air around it smelled like the pages of a book left out in the rain, sad, but not yet lost. She turned to Nixia, who was spinning a new dream between her palms, a tiny, restless thing that flickered like a candle in the wind. "This isn't just a forgotten story," Alara said, holding up the map. "It's calling me." Nixia's wings stilled. "Some dreams are locked away for a reason," she murmured. But her eyes betrayed her. She was afraid. Alara pressed her palm to the map, and the ink bled into her skin, rewriting itself along her veins. Directions pulsed in her wrists. "Follow the moths. Trust the cracks. Listen sideways." The journey was not like stepping through the silver key door. This time, she had to fold herself not through space, but through the thin places where reality had worn through. She slipped between the sound of a falling spoon and the sigh of a closing door. She stepped over the edge of a skipped heartbeat. And then, she was there. The well of unfinished stories was not a well at all, but a library sinking into itself. Towers of books leaned like tired old men, their pages half-eaten by time. Staircases spiraled into nowhere, and the air was thick with the scent of ink and longing. At the center stood a figure cloaked in dust. Not a person, a pause. A hesitation given shape. When it spoke, its voice was the rustle of a turned page. "You shouldn't be here." Alara's breath caught. "Neither should you." The figure laughed, and the sound made the books shiver. "I am the keeper of almost. Of stories that were never told, of dreams that slipped through fingers. You're the mender. But some things cannot be mended." A book floated toward her, its cover blank. When she touched it, images flashed. A lullaby half-sung. A door left unopened. A hand pulled back at the last moment. These are not dreams, Alara realized. These are regrets. The keeper nodded. Regrets are just dreams that turn the wrong way. And they are heavy. Too heavy for your moonbeam basket. But Alara was already reaching into her cloak, pulling out the vial of eternal twilight. "Then I'll use something stronger." She uncorked the vial, and the twilight poured out not as light, but as liquid shadow, pooling around the books. Where it touched, the story stirred. The half-sung lullaby found its missing verses. The unopened door creaked ajar. The withdrawn hand reached again. The keeper staggered. "You can't rewrite the past." "I'm not," Alara said softly. "I'm giving them a new ending." The library groaned, then sighed. The books glowed not with finished stories, but with possibility. One floated to her, its pages now gilded at the edges. Inside, a single sentence repeated, growing louder each time. "Tell it true. Tell it true. Tell it true." And then, a tug at her sleeve. Leora stood beside her, her storm eyes wide. "They're waking up," she whispered. Alara felt it then, a shift in the air. Not just in the well, but everywhere. The waking world was stirring, not from sleep, but from something deeper. Nixia had been wrong. The rules hadn't changed. They'd only been waiting to be remembered. Leora's fingers tightened around Alara's wrist, her touch humming with the electric charge of a storm about to break. "They're waking up," she said again, but this time, Alara heard the unsaid words beneath it, and they're afraid. The well of unfinished stories trembled. Books snapped shut like startled mouths. The keeper's cloak billowed as if caught in a wind no one else could feel. "What happens when an unfinished story wakes up?" Alara asked. The keeper's answer was a whisper of pages turning too fast. "It seeks an ending." And then, a sound. Not from the well, not from the Valley of Dreamweavers, but from somewhere deeper, older. A knocking. It echoed through the library, through Alara's ribs, through the vial of twilight still dripping from her fingers. It was the sound of someone or something asking to be let in. Leora's breath hitched. The first dreamer. Nixia had spoken of the first dreamer only once, in the hushed tone reserved for things too vast to name. The one who had dreamed the world into being. The one who had, long ago, closed their eyes and never opened them again. The knocking came again, louder. The keeper recoiled. No one answers that door. But Alara had never been good at leaving doors closed. She reached out, not with her hands, but with the part of her that had always known how to weave dreams. The part that remembered being starlight before it was skin. The library shuddered, and a door appeared where none had been before. It was made of midnight and morning, of the last sigh before sleep and the first blink upon waking. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then, a voice, so quiet it might have been her own thoughts. "I dreamed you first. Now you must dream me back." The door opened. Beyond it was not a being, not a god, not a figure at all, but a question, vast and endless, unfolding like a labyrinth made of mirrors. Every reflection showed a different Alara, Alara as a child, as an old woman, as a ripple in a stream, as a word on a forgotten page. "You don't remember," the voice sighed, and it was true. She didn't. But she felt it, the weight of 1,000 dreams pressing against her, all of them hers, all of them waiting. Leora's hand found hers. "It's not a door you walk through," she murmured. "It's a door you become." And so Alara did the only thing a Dreamweaver could do. She stepped into the mirror. In the Valley of Dreamweavers, the silver bells rang so fiercely they scattered like birds into the sky. Nixia looked up from her weaving and knew something had changed. In the waking world, children sat up in bed, their cheeks wet with tears they couldn't explain. In the well of unfinished stories, the keeper knelt, pressing their forehead to the first page of a book that now bore a title, The Dreamer Awakens. And somewhere between all of them, Alara opened her eyes. And the world shivered. The moment Alara opened her eyes, she understood why the first dreamer had kept theirs closed for so long. To see with Dreamweaver's sight was to behold the world not as solid, but as a tapestry of trembling possibilities, every thread a choice, every shimmer a road not taken. The air itself was alive with half-formed wishes, the unspoken words that linger in shared glances, the secret names we give ourselves in mirrors when no one else is watching. She stood. Did she still have feet? Did the ground still exist, in a place that was neither the well nor the valley, but the space between breaths where all stories begin? Before her stretched the first dreamer's question, not as words, but as a living river of light, branching into countless tributaries. Some glowed with the warm gold of lullabies, others pulsed with the bruised purple of nightmares thrashing against their chains. And there, at the center, coiled a thread so dark it drank the light around it. A forgotten thread. A cut cord. Alara reached for it instinctively, and the moment her fingers brushed its surface, memory struck her like a tolling bell. She saw a child, herself? Leora? Someone else entirely, standing at the edge of a cliff made of folded time. The child held scissors that gleamed with borrowed starlight. With one snip, a scream tore through the fabric of everything. Not a sound, but the absence of one. The silence where a story should have been. The vision shattered, leaving Alara gasping. The dark thread in her hand thrummed with a terrible, familiar weight. This was no ordinary unfinished tale. This was a dream that had been erased. A shadow moved at the edge of her vision. Leora stood there, but changed, her storm eyes now full of lightning, her wildflower crown wilted at the edges. "You weren't supposed to find that," she whispered. "Some dreams are missing for a reason." But Alara had already begun to unwind the thread, and as it unraveled, the world around them peeled back like layers of paint on an ancient mural. Beneath the Valley of Dreamweavers, beneath the waking world, beneath even the well of unfinished stories, there was another place. A place that had been dreaming itself all along. The Shattered Quarter. Here, fragments of lost dreams floated like icebergs in a frozen sea. Towers of broken hourglasses leaked sand that fell upward. Bridges made of unanswered letters arched over rivers of spilled ink. And everywhere, the whispers. What if I had spoken? What if I had stayed? What if I had been brave? Leora gripped Alara's arm, her fingers burning cold. This is where they put the dreams too dangerous to keep. The ones that could unravel everything if they were ever remembered. Alara understood then. The dark thread wasn't just a cut story. It was a weapon. A dream so potent it could rewrite the rules of dreaming itself. And someone had sent her to find it. The realization came like dawn breaking slow, then all at once. The indigo dream that led her to Leora. The well that showed her regrets. Even the first dreamer's door. None of it had been chance. She'd been guided. A laugh echoed across the frozen sea. Nixia stepped from behind a pillar of shattered mirrors, her stardust now edged in black. "Clever little weaver," she crooned. "You always were too curious for your own good." But it wasn't Nixia. Not really. The thing wearing her skin peeled back its lips to reveal teeth made of folded silence. "Give me the thread," it hissed. "It was never meant for hands like yours." Leora stepped between them, her storm eyes flashing. "Run." The last thing Alara saw before the world exploded into chaos was Leora's hands plunging into her own chest, not to rip out her heart, but to pull free the tempest she'd kept caged there all along. Then, darkness. And within it, a single, unbroken thread, glowing faintly against the void. The darkness around Alara was not empty, it was waiting. The kind of quiet that hums just before a lightning strike, the hush between a drawn breath and a scream. The thread in her hand pulsed like a second heartbeat, its light revealing things that had no names, shapes that were more shadow than substance, whispers that curled like smoke around syllables too ancient for mortal tongues. Leora's storm raged somewhere beyond the black, a distant thunder that made the void shudder. Nixia's laughter slithered through the cracks in the dark, sharp as broken glass. But here, in this breathless hollow between moments, there was only the thread and the choice it offered. Pull it, the silence seemed to urge. See what happens when a cut dream is rewoven. Alara hesitated. To mend what had been shattered was to change what came after. The stories in the well had shown her that much. But the thread burned against her palm, not with heat, but with a longing. As if it were a living thing straining towards something just out of reach. She exhaled and pulled. The thread resisted at first, then gave way with a sound like 1,000 pages tearing at once. Light erupted, not in a burst, but in an unfolding, fanning outward like wings made of dawn. The darkness peeled back, revealing a room. Not a grand hall or a mystic chamber, but a simple, sunlit bedroom. A child's room. Toys lay scattered across a rug worn thin by small feet. Drawings covered the walls, clumsy and bright. And there, curled in a narrow bed, slept a girl with hair like spun copper and fists clenched tight around a stuffed rabbit. Alara knew her at once. The first dreamer. Not a god. Not a legend. A child. And she was waking up. The girl's eyelids fluttered, her breath catching as she hovered on the edge of consciousness. With a jolt, Alara understood the first dreamer hadn't chosen to sleep forever. She'd been trapped. Lulled into an endless slumber by the thing wearing Nixia's face, her power siphoned drop by drop to feed the dreams of others. The Valley of Dreamweavers, the well, even the shattered quarter, they were all part of the machine built to keep her asleep. And the dark thread? The rabbit in the girl's arms was missing an eye. Where the other should have been, there was only a rough stitch, a thread pulled loose. Alara didn't think. She reached out and tugged. The toy's seam split with a sigh. Not stuffing, but light poured out the stolen dreams, the silent stories, all the might-have-beens that had been locked away. They flooded the room, the house, the world beyond the window, where the sky was just beginning to remember its true colors. Somewhere, Nixia screamed. The little girl sat up, rubbing her eyes. When she saw Alara, she didn't startle. She smiled. "You found me," she said, as if they'd made a promise long ago. Outside, the wind carried the sound of silver bells, and the world took a deep breath and began anew. The child's small hand reached out, fingers brushing Alara's wrist with the electric warmth of a summer dawn. Where their skin met, the air itself seemed to exhale, a long-held breath released after centuries. The stuffed rabbit tumbled to the floor between them, its remaining button eye blinking slowly, as if waking from its own long sleep. Outside the window, the sky was changing. Not from night to day, but from one kind of daylight to another, the difference between light that simply illuminates and light that truly sees. The trees in the yard straightened their backs, shaking leaves that now shimmered with edges of liquid gold. A sparrow perched on the windowsill tilted its head and sang a note that hadn't existed until this moment. "You've been dreaming for so long," Alara whispered, though she wasn't sure if the words were hers or the child's or the room's. The walls hummed in response, vibrating with colors that had no names, hues that existed only in the space between heartbeats. The first dreamer, this small, freckled child with sleep-mussed hair, swung her bare feet over the edge of the bed. The floorboards sighed beneath her toes, expanding like the chest of a contented cat. With each step, the world seemed to lean in closer. The dresser mirror rippled, showing not reflections, but possibilities. The half-open closet breathed out the scent of forgotten birthday cakes and new books. The window curtains billowed with a wind that carried voices from every story ever left untold. Then a sound like 1,000 keys turning at once. The bedroom door creaked open, revealing not a hallway, but the Valley of Dreamweavers transformed. The silver bell trees now grew in spirals, their chimes weaving a melody that made Alara's bones resonate. The starry brook had overflowed its banks, its luminous waters soaking into the earth where flowers burst open, not with petals, but with tiny, glowing hands that clapped in silent applause. Nyxia stood at the threshold, but the darkness had bled from her. Her wings, once edged in shadow, now shimmered like sunlight through stained glass. Behind her, Leora's storm eyes had cleared to a calm, deep blue, the color of the sky after a cleansing rain. They both bowed their heads, not in submission, but in recognition. The child stepped forward, her nightgown rippling as if underwater. When she spoke, her voice was the sound of every bedtime story's happy ending. "Let's go play." And just like that, the world remembered how. The rules dissolved like sugar in tea. Gravity became optional. Time curled up for a nap. The four of them, Child, Dreamweaver, Sand Maiden, and Stormbringer, stepped out into a valley that had never known limits. They climbed waterfalls that flowed upward to meet them. They picnicked on clouds that tasted of the listener's favorite memory. They built castles from hourglass sand and moats from liquid starlight. As dusk fell, because it wanted to, not because it had to, the first dreamer plucked a silver bell from a tree and pressed it into Alara's palm. Inside its delicate shell, a new dream shimmered, one that held the quiet magic of ordinary moments, the warmth of a shared blanket, the comfort of a familiar voice in the dark, the safety of knowing someone watches over your sleep. "Take it," the child said, yawning. "I think I'd like to rest now. But not forever. Just until morning." And as she curled up beneath the dreaming oak, which had grown a perfect, pillow-shaped hollow in its trunk, the others watched as the world settled around her, not frozen, not trapped, but simply paused, like a book left open at a good part. The last thing Alara saw before she too closed her eyes was Leora weaving crowns from the new flowers, Nyxia spinning a hammock from moonbeams, and the first dreamer's contented smile as she whispered to the stuffed rabbit now tucked under her arm. "Next time, you tell the story." And somewhere in 100,000 bedrooms across 100,000 worlds, children turned in their sleep and smiled back. As the first dreamer's breath deepened into slumber, the Valley of Dreamweavers softened around her. The silver bells stilled to a gentle chime, the rivers of starlight slowed to a murmur, and the wind carried the scent of fresh pages and warm milk. The great dreaming machine had quieted, not broken, not undone, but finally at peace. Alara sat beneath the dreaming oak, the bell dream cradled in her hands. It pulsed softly, a living thing, ready to be woven into the night. She smiled. This was the dream that would never be lost, the one that would always find its way home, the dream of being watched over, of being known, of never truly dreaming alone. Leora stretched out beside her, weaving constellations from loose threads of twilight. Nyxia hummed as she spun a new blanket from clouds and lullabies. And the first dreamer slept on, her fingers curled around the mended rabbit, its once missing eye now stitched back with a thread the color of second chances. Somewhere beyond the valley, in the waking world, a child turned in their sleep as the dream reached them, a whisper of warmth, a fleeting sense of arms they couldn't see holding them close. For the first time in centuries, the dreams were no longer borrowed. They were given. And so, as the last star of evening blinked awake, Alara closed her eyes and let the dream carry her too.